What if I told you that a new law in Canada may have a big effect on the economy of the United States? And some states are already on the brink? This isn't a theory, it's real, it's occurring now, and the effect has already begun from falling farm exports to dramatic job losses in rural America. The effects are spreading quickly, but here's the twist. Only some states are in the danger zone, so which ones will go first? And why are officials rushing behind the scenes hang around? This could be the most major change in trade in 2025. You haven't heard about. Number 10. Idaho. Could Idaho's dairy boom be the very thing that ruins it in 2025? 4 years Idaho has been racing up the standings, now holding the number 4 slot in milk production across the United States. But with Canada shutting its borders under the new Bill C-2 trade law, Idaho's expansion might turn from victory to disaster. Right now the indicators are hard to ignore. Milk output continues to climb, but without that vital Canadian demand, there's just nowhere for the surplus to go. Processing factories are overburdened, working at capacity with product they can't move fast enough. Some co-ops are privately considering the possibility of dumping milk solely to keep storage tanks from bursting, and as raw milk prices sink lower, producers are scrutinizing their margins. Vanish is Idaho's billion-dollar dairy infrastructure prepared for a crash. Like this, major cheese and powdered milk plants that once thrived on Canadian orders are pulling back. Fewer trucks are pulling in, fewer shifts are being filled, and in some rural towns, entire workforces are being placed on standby. The fear permanent closures if the market doesn't stabilize, but this is about more than just milk. Could the economic shock spread to the heart of Idaho's rural economy? Feed providers, fuel hauliers, and maintenance staff all depend on a buzzing dairy business. If the system slows down, everyone takes a hit, from truck drivers to local diners. And what about the little family farmers that just invested in expansion? New barns, new cows, new gear, all based on estimates that expected sustained export demand. With the Canadian market now cut off, those loans suddenly look a lot more risky. Are we experiencing the beginning of a slow motion collapse? Or can Idaho find new buyers before the situation escalates? Drop your opinions in the comments. Do you believe Idaho can dodge the fallout? Or is this catastrophe only getting started? And if you haven't already, hit the like button and subscribe, there's more you need to watch next. Number 9. Texas. Might the Lone Star State's phenomenal dairy expansion be the same thing weighing it down in 2025? Texas has rapidly ascended the charts to become one of the top milk-producing states in America. But now that momentum is hitting head-on with Canada's trade blockade, and the timing could not be worse. Dairy production in Texas rose last year, enjoying the greatest rise among the top 5 milk-producing states. New farms arose, herds multiplied, and investments poured into infrastructure. But now that Canadian demand has been cut off, the sector is bursting with supplies and running out of locations to ship it. Milk prices are dropping and the financial buffer farmers formerly had is gone. Processing firms in West Texas are facing tough choices, with fewer export orders coming in. Facilities are started to scale back shifts. Some workers have already been laid off. Tankers of milk are being redirected or turned away outright, causing farms to either dump product or store it at tremendous cost. And let's talk about Texas's rural economy. Could entire counties start to suffer when their core business begins to shrink? Feed mills, veterinarian services haulers, and equipment providers all depend on a booming dairy sector. Now that market is slowing and everyone down the chain is feeling it. Towns that were previously booming alongside the dairy surge may now be suffering stagnation or worse, decline. What about the farmers who invested everything based on increased demand forecasts? Some took out loans to develop larger barns or acquire more cows, betting on consistent overseas sales. Now with Canada out of reach, those estimates have plummeted. How do they pay back lenders while selling milk at rock-bottom prices? Could Texas's dairy empire be due for a painful contraction? One that rewrites the future of its agricultural domination. Let us know what you think in the comments. Can Texas rebound from this export freeze? Or are we seeing the start of something bigger? And don't forget to like this video and subscribe before we move to the next state. Number 8, California. Could Canada's new trade barrier cause California's dairy powerhouse to be the first to fall? The Golden State makes more milk than any other state, but that dominance is now in doubt. Its billion-dollar export chain depended on Canada to take in extra goods. That door is now shut. There is too much milk, prices are falling, and farmers have to throw away milk they can't sell. So how can you handle millions of liters with nowhere to go, and will small family farms survive another strike like this? Add to that the burden on big processing plants that once thrived on international demand. Some may soon shut down or lay off workers. But the biggest fear might be this: if California, the leader, starts dropping, who follows next? The ripple effect might affect the entire dairy sector across America. Is this merely the beginning of a far broader collapse? Number 7, Wisconsin. Can a state built on cheese and milk survive when its main buyer shuts the gates? Wisconsin is facing a silent storm. Dairy exports, previously worth billions, are now frozen as Canada's new trade law cuts off access for American products. Processing industries are reducing back operations, hurting both huge enterprises and local cooperatives. Small farms, often passed down for generations, are drowning in overstock. They cannot move. Could the failure of these family farms trickle into the towns they support? Schools, suppliers, and trucking businesses are already seeing the cracks, and with prices decreasing faster than anyone thought, how long until some producers simply walk away? Is this the moment Wisconsin's dairy dominance begins to erode, or will the state reinvent its agricultural economy before it is too late? With Canada being off the table, the following steps may decide the destiny of America's dairyland. Number 6, Michigan. What happens when one of the most efficient dairy states in America finds itself producing more, but selling less? Michigan, known for its high-output herds and advanced processing facilities, is now trapped in a storm it didn't see coming. The first cracks are already visible. Farmers across Michigan are reporting a rapid backlog in unsold milk. Some processors are slowing pickups, prioritizing just their larger contracts and leaving smaller manufacturers in uncertainty. Meanwhile, the price per 100 weight has taken a nosedive, and for many enterprises that spells disaster. Loans are harder to manage, margins are gone, and expansion plans are being scrapped across the board. Could this be the breaking point for the smaller family-run dairies that have made Michigan a pioneer in dairy innovation? These farms have long prided themselves on quality and consistency, but without Canada's demand, their market just vanished overnight. What happens when creamer can no longer afford to churn out the award-winning cheese that once traveled north over the border? Specialty products, Gouda, cheddar, and yogurt brands related to Canadian contracts are now sitting in cold storage with no destination. That storage comes at a cost, and sooner or later someone has to pay. Which other sections of Michigan's economy are likely to face the pinch? Trucking companies related to export logistics are already running fewer routes. Feed mills are seeing orders slow. Even local cafes and rural schools, many of which rely on contracts with dairy and distributors, are responding to financial shocks. How do you recover momentum in an industry founded on predictability when your second-largest trade partner has closed the gate behind them with Bill CT-202 now law in Canada? There is no indication of relief coming anytime soon. So where does Michigan go from here? Do producers seek overseas/production or hold out for a domestic rebound? Will high-efficiency farms be adequate to survive the drop? Or will this trade fallout break even the strongest? Share your thoughts in the comments. How terrible do you believe the situation is for Michigan farmers right now? Make sure you like this video and subscribe before we move on. The following state may surprise you. Number 5, New York is one of America's oldest dairy states, silently moving toward a modern-day catastrophe. New York, long recognized for its world-class milk, cheese, and yogurt manufacturing, is feeling the sting of Canada's unexpected trade freeze, and the fractures are already starting to show. Milk output in New York climbed rapidly to over 1.36 billion pounds at the start of 2025. But without Canada taking in its customary shipments, supply is stacking up rapidly. Processors are cutting down their intake, and some farmers are now being requested to hold down production, something unheard of just a year ago. Meanwhile, prices are plunging, and that's cutting into the already razor-thin profits most producers operate on. Could this evolve into a long-term problem for New York's family farms? Many of these enterprises depend on steady volume and predictable revenues to stay afloat. The sudden loss of one of its most reliable buyers is forcing harsh options, lower herd levels, take on additional debt, or consider shutting down entirely. But the story doesn't finish at the farm. How will this affect the upstate economy that thrives off dairy jobs? From local truckers delivering raw milk, to rural villages with businesses catering to agricultural workers, everyone's ready for a downturn. Schools and towns established around the dairy belt are already witnessing reduced finances and increased fear. And then there's the risk to New York's processing plants, especially those dealing in export-grade cheeses and yogurts. Will they have to adjust production strategies, or will we start witnessing layoffs and closures as shelves fill with unsold goods? Is it fair to argue that New York's dairy sector is now vulnerable from every angle? Or is there still a chance to pivot before the harm becomes irrevocable? Number 4. Georgia. Why is Georgia's poultry industry once a national success story, now looking down a probable collapse? The state raised nearly 1,364,000,000 broiler chickens in 2024, more than practically anywhere in America. But with Canada locking its trade doors shut under Bill CTW 102, that vast production machine is now dangerously overbuilt. Right present, processors are confronting congested cold storage facilities. Export shipments to Canada that formerly cleared merchandise out by the ton are gone. Chickens still going through the pipeline, but the exit routes have vanished, prices are plummeting, and producers are being paid less per bird if they're being paid at all. On top of that, egg producers are reporting a growing backlog with fewer markets willing to take in large-scale shipments, who absorbs the financial shock when 100 of millions of chickens have no buyer. Contract growers, many of whom built entire livelihoods on poultry, are watching their margins evaporate, and since many operate under agreements with large processing companies, they're stuck expected to produce on schedule with no say in how or where their product gets sold. How long can Georgia's rural towns survive with their poultry plants slowing down in several areas? These facilities are the heartbeat of the community, employing hundreds, supporting schools through local taxes and generating demand for everything from feed to fuel. But now shifts are being slashed and smaller processing businesses are beginning to shut down altogether. Where does this leave those who recently invested in growth? New equipment, expanded housing, more feed, all made under the assumption that international markets would continue to grow without Canada. That growth has hit a wall, and those loans do not disappear just because the contracts did when a state like Georgia, so dominant in its industry, starts to stumble. What does that signal for the rest of the country? Is this a warning shot? Or is Georgia already deep into a trade-driven crisis? Number 3. Pennsylvania. Can the calm hills of Pennsylvania take the roar of an agricultural collapse? For decades, this state has been the backbone of American dairy, undulating fields, hard-working people, and a deep-rooted heritage of farming. But with Canada's new trade lockout, that entire structure is starting to wobble. Milk output in Pennsylvania declined 2% in August of 2024, and the trend has not returned. Smaller farmers are trying to keep up with the costs of operation while watching market prices decline. Processing co-ops on seed trustworthy partners are now limiting how much milk they would accept each week, and shipments that once passed the northern border are now sitting still, accumulating dust in rural warehouses. How many of these little farms can survive another year like this? Most of them rely on modest continuous returns, just enough to pay the bills and pass something on to the next generation. Now they are being forced to CU herds, cancel equipment upgrades, or borrow just to stay afloat. Can a dairy community run on survival mode alone? Zoom out, and the shockwaves go deeper. How many local supply linkages will begin to crumble as demand slows? Feed retailers, fuel providers, veterinarians, and seasonal laborers all depend on dairy being in motion. If that movement stops, how many local businesses follow it down? What happens to the schools and hospitals in these rural regions when farms begin closing doors for good? The dairy business supports entire communities throughout Pennsylvania. When it hurts, everyone feels it, and then there is the wider picture. Will other nations cover Canada's import deficit with their own items while American exports are frozen? If Pennsylvania loses its presence in overseas markets today, how long will it take to claw back in later? Could we be witnessing the steady decline of Pennsylvania's agricultural legacy right before our eyes? Number 2, North Carolina. Why are farmers in North Carolina suddenly on edge despite record productivity on paper? The state is a livestock powerhouse, one of the top producers of both chicken and eggs in the United States. But with Canada's new trade barrier firmly locked in, North Carolina's best strengths are starting to feel like major liabilities. Thousands of hens and turkeys are being grown every day, but the export orders that formerly gave those numbers purpose have dried up. Cold storage is nearing capacity in numerous processing plants. Prices at the farm level have decreased substantially, causing smaller farmers to sell below cost merely to keep the lights on. Meanwhile, egg producers are confronting a growing excess that has no way out, especially with Canada no longer supplying help through its prior import limitations. What kind of burden does that create on processors who once operated 24-hour shifts to accommodate international demand? Now some facilities are decreasing output lines or considering temporary closures. That's not simply bad news for the crops. It's a danger to rural jobs across the board. Where do contract farmers proceed from here, especially those that took on loans based on predicted growth? Many of them erected bigger barns, enlarged their flocks, or acquired additional property, all under the belief that markets would keep increasing. Now they are facing down loan obligations without the revenue to cover them. What does this entail for the broader food supply chain in the region? Feed suppliers, transport operators, hatcheries, and even equipment dealers are seeing the ripple effects. A stoppage in poultry processing doesn't stay in one lane, it brings everything down with it. Why are local leaders so quiet? Despite knowing entire communities will soon experience economic downturn in counties where agricultural makes up the backbone of the local economy, a shift like this could deplete tax revenue, pressure schools, and thin out healthcare access. Will North Carolina's livestock economy survive this tightening? Vice? Or is this simply the beginning of a prolonged slide? Number 1. Alabama. What does a state do when its major industry hits a wall with no warning? Alabama, one of America's top poultry powerhouses, is now deep in the fallout zone following Canada's trade shutdown, and the impacts are stacking up quicker than the birds themselves. Alabama's poultry sector, which slaughtered nearly 900 million broilers in 2024 alone, is beginning to suffocate under its own prosperity. With Canadian markets officially locked by Bill C-2-102, there's nowhere for extra stuff to go. Processing factories are reporting filled storage units, some running dangerously near to capacity. Poultry prices have plummeted so low that producers are just breaking even or worse, running at a loss, and now numerous factories have started decreasing operational hours, leaving thousands of workers with fewer shifts and unclear futures. Where does it leave the farmers who built entire operations around steady export demand? Many took out loans to expand, purchase new equipment, or double their flock sizes. Now they're stranded with too many birds, rising feed prices, and buyers who are backing out should they sell early at great discounts, cut back output, and face penalties from their integrators. Neither approach keeps them afloat for long. What ripple effect hits when an industry this vast begins to slow? Rural areas that rely on poultry processing are already reporting slumps in local commercial activity. Feed stores, mechanic shops, and transportation companies that once ran on continuous chicken income flow are tightening their belts, and school districts, financed mostly by agricultural taxes, are bracing for smaller budgets and tough decisions. When the backbone of a $40 billion state economy starts to bend, what comes next? Alabama's poultry sector has long been a symbol of reliability, efficient, large, and profitable, but in 2025 that foundation is beginning to shake. Will local politicians fight for emergency relief or wait for things to become worse, and how many farms will shut down before serious change is considered? The effect from Canada's trade change is already shaking around the US, and these states are just the beginning. Which one do you think will experience the largest collapse? Drop your opinions below and don't forget to like, share and subscribe, so you never miss updates on what's unfolding next.